The golden light filtered through the window of a high-rise room in a city that never sleeps, casting reflections on the eyes of a young man whose gaze burned with an unquenchable ambition, someone who had walked away from everything to start over from nothing. Not every success story begins with a golden inheritance or billion-dollar connections. Some begin with a cold night, an old suitcase, and a single $100 bill lying alone on the marble floor of a grand mansion. This is not merely a journey of numbers and deals, but the journey of a man who dared to turn his back on everything that had been carefully arranged for him, choosing instead to set foot on a path of his own, one paved not with roses but with a resolve that refused to be extinguished. Listen to the story of Ethan Walker, a man who turned a dark night into a radiant dawn and a cold bill into a pride no one could deny. That day, the golden light from the vintage chandelier in the Walker mansion's grand hall still shone down like a cruel reminder of this family's legacy and arrogance. Opulent oil paintings and expensive furnishings breathing with the history of generations of wealth stood witness to this ritual of expulsion, not a farewell. Ethan Walker stood there, shoulders trembling slightly, but his face remained composed, even cold. In his simple attire, a worn white shirt and khaki pants, he looked completely out of place among the luxury enveloped in walnut wood and gleaming marble. Opposite him sat George Walker, his powerful father and master of high-stakes investments, on a black leather chair gripping the family's symbolic cane in his hand. He didn't shout or rage, but his look of contempt was sharper than any insult. "Here," he said in a hoarse voice, throwing a stack of small bills onto the marble floor before Ethan. $100. That is all someone like you deserves. Crisp banknotes scattered under the chandelier's light like fragments of a shattered dream. Ethan didn't bend to pick them up immediately. Instead, he stared at his father, then at his mother, silent like a ghost at a victor's feast, then looked up at the portrait-lined staircase ancestors in fine suits, women in lace collars and proud expressions. That was the legacy from which Ethan had just been exiled. He took a deep breath, then slowly bent to pick up each bill, placing them in his wallet like a solemn vow. Within him stirred not fear or shame, but something fierce and powerful: determination. His eyes glowed not with anger, but with the conviction that from these ashes he would build his own empire. "I won't take a cent from the trust fund," Ethan said calmly, as though reading from a textbook, but each word cut through the air like a blade. "I will not take the Walker name and beg for help. I will create my own value." George scoffed, his laughter slicing through the silence like a dagger. "Without the Walker name, you are nothing," he said, eyes shining with the satisfaction of absolute power. Ethan only nodded slightly, his gaze steady and resolute. Then he turned away toward a simple suitcase he'd prepared, just one bag carrying the bare essentials for a fresh start. Each step he took on the cold marble floor was a farewell to the illusions and chains his family had used to imprison him for 22 years. The heavy iron gates of the mansion closed behind him with a harsh clang, like the lid sealing a coffin. Ethan stepped out into the night air of San Francisco, crisp, yet refreshing. He touched his wallet, feeling the $100, the parting gift of scorn that would ignite everything ahead. He looked up at the night sky, where stars flickered like embers of hope behind the clouds. In that moment, he understood one thing: the road ahead would be long and harsh, but it was his own. And when one has nothing left to lose, that is precisely when one has everything to gain. Ethan left the Walker mansion in the biting cold of San Francisco, his breath turning to thin mist before vanishing into the darkness of the night. He had no car, no place to go, only his feet and a suitcase packed with an ambition he had never known before. Walking along the damp cobblestone sidewalk, Ethan listened to the sound of his shoes striking the ground, like the background music to an uncertain beginning. He reached the bus station with $100 in his wallet and an engineering degree his family had always looked down upon. The skyscrapers of San Francisco glowed in the distance like guiding beacons, but Ethan knew they were also proud fortresses, leaving no space for a man with no name. After hours of wandering, Ethan found a small cafe called Maple's Brew, a modest place nestled under the canopy of a maple tree, its foggy windows reflecting warm yellow light. He stepped inside the cozy room's warmth, washing away the chill from outside. In that space, the smell of roasted coffee mingled with the soft notes of classic jazz playing like a soothing balm. Ethan ordered a black coffee, trying to stretch out his stay, his eyes following the drip of water from the broken coffee machine, finally resting on the young woman working behind the counter, a brunette with wide eyes and hastily tied hair, Claire. She caught his gaze and smiled politely, though curiosity flickered beneath the surface. "You're going to get mugged if you sleep out there," Claire said when she saw him leaning back in his chair, eyes fixed on the screen of an old laptop. Ethan let out a quiet laugh, his deep voice calm but determined. "I don't have another choice. I just need a place to stay for the night." Claire glanced at the broken coffee machine, hesitating before nodding towards it. "If you can fix this piece of junk, I'll let you sleep in the storage room after we close." It was an offer no one else would have made. Ethan flipped the machine open, his hands moving confidently across each screw and wire, a dance he had mastered back in college. In just 20 minutes, the machine roared back to life, the hiss of steam and the whir of the pump filling the air with energy. Claire's mouth dropped open, her eyes lighting up as if she had just witnessed a small miracle. "What's your name?" she asked. Ethan gave a small smile, unzipping his backpack and setting it down in the corner. "Ethan Walker. Just an unemployed engineer with a crazy idea." Claire didn't ask any more questions, simply handed him a thin blanket. That night, Ethan slept among burlap sacks of coffee and the faint scent of decaying wood, but there was no room in his heart for despair. He knew that from this night on, that $100 would no longer be just money. It would be the fuel for a journey he had never dared to imagine, to rebuild his worth. Not with a family name, but with hands and a mind that would never bow down. In the days that followed, Ethan began an unusual life, as if he were standing between two worlds by day, making coffee and mopping floors at Maple's Brew, and by night spending quiet hours with his old laptop, his fingers dancing across the keyboard like a ballet, sketching out intricate blueprints for an energy storage system that only he believed was possible. He sat in a corner of the cafe at a weathered oak table with peeling varnish, taking advantage of the free Wi-Fi to access technical forums, poring over existing patents, and noting down every detail like a man desperate to touch the truth. Claire would sometimes stop by, setting down a small sandwich or a hot cup of coffee in front of him, her gaze part admiring, part questioning. "What are you drawing?" she asked one evening when she saw his notes strewn across the table. Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes glinting. "I'm not just drawing. I'm building a dream the world thinks is impossible." Claire looked at the complex molecular diagrams, the English words and tangled formulas, then shook her head and laughed. "You're crazy," she said, but in her voice was a flicker of belief. And so, night after night, Ethan labored to solve the puzzle how to store renewable energy with almost no loss, a dream he'd had since college, now burning brighter than ever. On nights when the city lights shimmered, he would watch the reflections dance across the surface of the San Francisco Bay, full of conviction that the future lay not in the financial towers his father had built, but in the humble tables and unquenchable ambition that refused to die. When he finally managed to save a little money from his cafe work, Ethan moved in with 5 other young men engineers, dreamers and oddballs like him, in a cheap rented room where the hallways smelled of mildew and the ceiling leaked every time it rained. In that cramped space, surrounded by dusty technical books and cold instant noodles, Ethan found something more precious than money: the unconditional faith of people like him, those who had dared to leave the path laid out for them to chase a light that only they could see. There, amid the clacking of keyboards and burning dreams, he realized a simple truth. No setback is meaningless as long as you hold on to passion and resilience. 6 months after arriving in San Francisco, Ethan had gradually fallen into the rhythm of the dusty neon-lit nights. He no longer slept in the storage room behind the cafe, but shared a small room in a dilapidated building with 5 other young engineers. People who, like him, carried within them the glimmer of those who dared to challenge fate. Every morning, Ethan still worked the early shift at Maple's Brew, his hands accustomed to the heat of the coffee machine and the steady clink of spoons in ceramic cups. But at night, he was himself again, no longer the humble cafe worker, but an engineer nurturing an idea that could change the world. In the foggy San Francisco nights, he meticulously refined every detail in his design, searching for those elegant solutions that could turn a dream into reality. It was an energy storage system with a completely new molecular structure, a technology even the top researchers deemed impossible. Ethan knew they wouldn't believe, but he pressed on because to him it wasn't just passion, it was proof that a person's worth couldn't be measured by their name or inherited wealth. One day, while moonlighting as a hardware technician for a small startup, Ethan met David Lin, a young founder with sharp eyes hidden behind a simple demeanor. Ethan fixed a major hardware problem for David in just one evening, leaving him astonished. "What else are you working on?" David asked, his eyes glimmering with curiosity. After a brief hesitation, Ethan decided to share his crazy idea, the one that had followed him from those long nights in college to the silent corners of that cafe. He opened his battered laptop, and technical drawings filled the screen: molecular schematics, energy conversion principles, numbers and curves, that only those who understood could see the marvel within them. David sat silently staring at the numbers, at the fire burning in Ethan's eyes. "This isn't just a design," David said slowly. "If you can pull this off, it will change everything." David then introduced Ethan to Dr. Grace Huang, a leading expert in nanomaterials at Stanford University. That meeting took place in a lab flooded with white light, a space radiating both scholarship and rigor. Grace sat opposite Ethan, her eyes as sharp as a blade, holding his design in her hands for 6 straight hours, asking questions not just about the technology, but about his resolve and vision. Every answer from Ethan was steady, unwavering, because he knew this design like the very beat of his heart. Finally, Grace nodded, her gaze flashing with rare excitement. "You're ambitious, maybe even a little crazy," she said. "But if what you believe is true, this isn't just progress, it's a revolution." And then the impossible happened. Dr. Grace offered Ethan access to Berkeley's most advanced laboratory, a chance most young engineers could only dream of. That night, back in his cramped room, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat by the drafty window, looking at the distant lights of the city, his heart racing. He knew at that very moment that his path had taken a new turn. From someone cast out by his family, from a cafe worker sleeping in the back room, he was now poised to enter a world where talent and dreams would no longer be measured by lineage, but by his own hands and mind. That night, Ethan silently vowed, no matter how many sleepless nights it took, no matter how many doubts he had to cross, he would make the impossible real. And he would do it not just for himself, but for everyone who dared to believe that sometimes the greatest value a person has isn't what they're given, but what they create with their own 2 hands. The laboratory at Berkeley was a world entirely different from anywhere Ethan had ever known a place, with no room for leniency or trivial fears. Beneath the harsh white glow of fluorescent lights, surrounded by the low hum of machinery and the sharp tang of solvents in the air, he moved like a sleepwalker, yet with a clarity sharper than ever. Ethan split his time into 4 parts: mornings at the coffee shop, afternoons repairing hardware for startups, evenings immersed in the lab at Berkeley, and nights lost in the drawings and simulations on his old laptop. He lived on strong coffee, stale bread, and an unwavering faith that he was heading in the right direction. Each night, as San Francisco fell silent, Ethan methodically checked every measurement, every data point of the molecular structure he was developing a storage system capable of nearly 100% efficiency, something the industry had deemed impossible. He didn't know exactly how many nights he'd stayed awake, only that he remembered the steady tapping of keys and the electric thrill whenever a new model materialized on the screen. There were moments when he nearly despaired as phase indices skewed, errors multiplied, and test samples shattered before his eyes. But in the darkness of doubt, there was always a flicker of light. One night in March, as Ethan slumped over the table, the computer screen suddenly displayed results he had to triple-check to believe. An efficiency rate of 98.7%, a number even the most seasoned professors would only dare dream of. Ethan didn't jump up to cheer or pound the desk in triumph. He simply sat there feeling his chest swell as if it might burst. In that empty room with only the whir of a fan in the background, he realized this moment, the one unseen and uncelebrated by anyone else, was the purest proof of his worth. The next morning, Ethan shared the results with Dr. Grace. She examined the numbers over and over, her eyes brightening like sparks. "You haven't just broken the limits," she said slowly, "you're rewriting the entire rulebook." News spread faster than he'd imagined. Investment funds began to send invitations for meetings. Renowned researchers reached out to learn more about his work. But Ethan didn't rush. He knew that what he needed now wasn't praise or lucrative opportunities. He needed a launchpad, a place to turn his dream into an actual product, a solution that wouldn't just change the energy industry but would transform how people understood the power of innovation. In those final days before the turning point, he still worked at Maple's Brew, still greeted customers with a calm smile, but deep down he was an entirely new Ethan. Someone who had proved to himself that the $100 once thrown at his feet was never his destiny. It was merely the starting point of an unending journey to rise. Rumors of Ethan's breakthrough spread like a wave through the research and investment communities, yet for him everything remained calm and focused. Amidst the flurry of calls, invitations from funds, and promising conversations, Ethan still found himself tucked into a corner of Maple's Brew, fingers dancing across his laptop, eyes contemplative over numbers and diagrams. He understood better than anyone his project was no longer just an idea. It was a seed that had sprouted and was ready to grow, but he needed the right people to nurture it. One late afternoon, as the golden light bathed San Francisco's old rooftops, Ethan met Alexander Brooks, the principal partner at Quantum Edge Capital. They met in a spacious office with natural light pouring onto gleaming oak floors and abstract paintings lining the hallway. Unlike most investors, Alexander was unshowy and unassuming, his gaze calm, yet sparkling with curiosity and excitement. He placed a steaming cup of green tea before Ethan invited him into a gray linen upholstered armchair, hands clasped, waiting for Ethan to speak. Ethan recounted everything: the first night sleeping on a park bench, the unfinished drawings in the small coffee shop, the final test in Berkeley's lab when efficiency hit 98.7%. Every word carried faith and determination, as if he were sharing not just a project, but his soul. Alexander listened, his deep eyes seeming to look through numbers and charts to the person behind the ideas. When Ethan finished, silence filled the room, except for the clock's ticking. Alexander nodded and cracked a rare, empathetic smile between two strangers. "You know," Alexander began firmly yet gently, "people in this industry always chase security numbers that promise profit. But I didn't come here to invest in safety. I came to find the impossible, and you are the impossible." He extended his hand in a wordless invitation. "Quantum Edge Capital will invest $5 million for a 25% stake, and in return, will be the springboard for your dream. Total trust, not just in the tech, but in you." Ethan shook his hand, feeling warmth pass through their fingertips. Not just a deal, but the connection of two souls meeting in a noisy world. That very night, Ethan founded Novavolt Systems, the new star he had envisioned in those misty San Francisco nights. He rented a small workspace in the industrial south of the city without glossy walls or corporate towers, only rows of makeshift wooden desks and harsh fluorescent lights. There, Ethan gathered a team of talented young engineers, people who believed in his dream, as he once believed in himself. They worked from dawn till dusk, keystrokes echoing like an unspoken symphony. Each new idea scrawled on whiteboards filled with equations. 2 years passed like a harsh winter gale full of challenges and promise. NovaVolt Systems launched its first commercial energy storage system with 99.1% efficiency, a figure beyond all expectations, outshining every competitor. News spread across the renewable energy world, triggering orders from the industry's biggest companies. On the day of the final trial, as his engineers applauded the results on screen, Ethan quietly stood, eyes shimmering with deep fulfillment, knowing that from a cramped coffee shop room and a scorned $100, he had reached a new star, not just NovaVolt, but Ethan Walker himself, one who dared to believe that a dream never dies if you nourish it with your own heart. The news about NovaVolt Systems spread like wildfire through parched woods, igniting a wave of excitement not only in the tech world, but also in the hearts of those long forgotten. On the day Ethan watched his company's stock surge in its first trading session, he didn't stand on a podium like other leaders. Instead, he stood quietly behind the glass of a skyscraper, gazing at the reflection of San Francisco through the windows, a testament to the audacity of someone once called worthless. Yet that glory was only the beginning. As NovaVolt Systems became an emblem of renewable energy, the Walker family teetered amid the storm. Ethan heard that Walker and Sons Investments, the financial empire once confident in its timeless investments, was plunging into crisis. Their brick-and-mortar buildings still stood, the family name still engraved above the doors, but inside lay a hollow void of outdated dreams and a pride that had cracked. Rumor had it that Walker and Sons was being taken over by a new investment firm called Digital Horizon Partners. No one knew that Ethan was the one behind it all. He wasn't doing it for revenge, at least not entirely. He did it because he understood that true power lies not in lineage or legacy, but in the ability to seize opportunity and reshape the world. In sealed boardroom meetings amidst cold financial statements, Ethan walked in silence like a specter from the past, but this time he was no longer the outcast. He was the decision maker. Every time he signed a document to acquire shares, he heard the ticking of his youth, the long nights typing till his fingers went numb, the misty mornings at Maple's Brew. And now he held the final lever of a seemingly invincible empire firmly in his grasp. Ethan prepared to return to the boardroom where he once bowed, humiliated by a mere $100. He was no longer the obedient son silenced by insults, nor the unknown engineer. He was the CEO of NovaVolt Systems and the true owner of Digital Horizon Partners. Before him lay not just a company but buried memories and a silent oath of someone once cast aside. And in a beautiful paradox, Walker and Sons, those who once scorned him, would now become part of his new vision, not built on legacy but on innovation. Not on status, but on effectiveness. Not on money, but on real human value. The night before his return, Ethan looked out over the city glowing with golden lights. It felt like a symphony he had composed, each note bursting forth and echoing in his chest. And he understood tomorrow would not be a reunion, but a debut, the debut of someone who had turned failure into fuel and betrayal into a springboard to the summit. Under the city's pale golden glow, Ethan Walker clenched his fist, ready to step into the place that had once been his wound, now his stage of triumph. Ethan's footsteps echoed down the gleaming oak-paneled halls of Walker and Sons Investments, each tap and click against the floor, a reminder that he was returning not as a failed heir, but as the rightful owner of his own destiny. The air in the boardroom was thick with expensive perfume and wary glances. Those same people who once snickered at a lowly engineer's dream were now awaiting judgment from the very man they dismissed. As the door swung open, Ethan stepped in charcoal gray suit molded to his solid shoulders, not a crease on it, not a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He slid into the chair at the head of the table, the same chair he once only dared to observe from afar, while his father, George Walker, sat there like a monarch handing down decree. George studied him, face gaunt compared to 4 years ago, and salt and pepper hair now flecked with sorrowful gray. But the pride in his gaze, the pride that built an empire, was intact, the same gaze that once crushed Ethan in its glare. "We're not selling our company to a child with technological illusions." George rasped his tone, cutting through Ethan's resolve like a blade. Ethan offered a wry smile, flipping open the dossier before him, its pages stamped with blazing red seals hammering down the proud walls of Walker and Sons. "You needn't sell, father," he replied evenly, as if discussing the weather. Digital Horizon Partners has already purchased 45% of the shares and assumed all company debt. Control no longer lies with Walker and Sons. Silence enveloped the room. Ethan felt every Gaze Cousins board member's men who once lounged on luxury yachts with his father now hanging their heads in worry. A trembling voice from the corner spoke, "Ethan, this is family." But Ethan shook his head, his eyes shimmering with resolve that tolerated no half measures. Family. He fixed his gaze on his father, and memories flooded in the night. He retrieved the dollar bills his father flung at his feet. The night he slept outside a cafe, holding onto nothing but his own breath. "I've buried enough already," Ethan said firmly, voice clear like a bell. "Tonight, I'm not here to ask for approval from anyone. I'm here to declare that an empire unwilling to evolve is doomed, and I am the one who brings change." George slammed his palm on the table, the crash like thunder amid a storm. "You'll destroy everything, our legacy, everything we built with our lives." His voice faltered, not a commanding father anymore, but a man clinging to ruin. Ethan offered a calm nod and cast his gaze upon the portraits lining the walls. The forebears who believed money was the sole measure of worth. "I'm not here to destroy," Ethan replied deliberately, his words like nails driven into the marble floor. "I'm here to integrate it into the future one that you refused to see." He rose with quiet determination. "You have 24 hours," he said, his low voice filling every silent corner. "Either accept the merger of Walker and Sons into Digital Horizon and usher this company into a new era, or I will call every loan and end this legacy right here." Ethan left the boardroom like a chill wind, leaving faces drained of color and schemes rendered obsolete. And as the door slammed shut behind him, he knew that today was not merely a corporate victory, it was a reckoning. Between him and the ghost of his past, between the one once underestimated and the empire that scorned him. Ethan Walker, who departed with just $100 and a dream, had returned like a tidal wave, washing away the old prejudices and rewriting his story right in the heart of the empire that once rejected him. 6 months after that fateful day, Walker and Sons was no longer a fortress clinging to the past, but had become a shining branch within NovaVolt Systems, part of Ethan's grand and unyielding vision. He didn't destroy his father's legacy. He rebuilt it brick by brick on the foundation of a new era where technology and determination are not mere slogans, but the real heartbeat of a sustainable future. Throughout the merger, Ethan insisted on retaining those who had quietly created real value so they could continue working not beneath antique portraits, but before whiteboards full of formulas and bold visions. During long nights, he toiled just as he once did behind the keyboard at Maple's Brew, but now each of his ideas didn't just change his own life, but reshaped an entire industry, redefining how people think about energy innovation and the worth of a human being. A year after NovaVolt Systems reached $1 billion valuation, Ethan sat in his glass-walled office on the top floor of the new building not for show, but to regard the San Francisco skyline glittering like a miniature cosmos. On his desk lay a slim parcel, a pale ivory envelope with handwriting he recognized instantly. Inside was the $100 bill his father had thrown at him years ago, and a small note reading, "You are worth more than I ever believed." Ethan allowed himself a small smile as an emotion rose within him, no longer hate or contempt, but silent affirmation of his own worth. Value isn't found in others' praise but in the path we have dared to walk, even if our first steps were shaky. He took that $100 bill to Maple's Brew, the coffee shop that offered him refuge in his early days. Claire, now the executive director of the cafe chain Ethan had invested in, looked up at him, her eyes as bright as ever. He placed the bill on the table, an offering no one else could fully understand. "Use it for the next person," he said, voice warm and steady. Claire nodded, knowing that some debts never need repayment because they've become essential pieces of a story, not belonging to one person, but to all who dare to walk their own way. Stepping out of the cafe, Ethan looked up at the night sky, where stars winked above, where now he was no longer a wanderer, but a creator of his own universe. He understood that money cannot buy happiness, but that $100 had bought him something far more precious than any fortune, the right to stand up and say, "I wasn't granted value, I created it myself." And within the steady pulse of the city at night, Ethan Walker pressed onward, not bound by name or past, but driven by one unwavering belief: when you dare to turn dreams into reality, even a single bill can become priceless. When the final curtain of night fell, Ethan Walker was no longer a name buried beneath outdated legacies. He had become living proof of rebirth, from failure transforming insults into the materials of his own empire. And above all, his story serves as a powerful reminder that no path is more solid than one built by your own hands and unwavering resolve. If Ethan's journey has touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring journeys. Let's spread the spirit of daring to dream, daring to act, and daring to prove our own true worth, because sometimes just a single moment can change a life.